Poor single dad let a lost girl stay the night. Not knowing she was the billionaire's daughter, the little girl stood barefoot in the pouring rain, trembling on the cracked wooden porch of a rundown house, clutching a soaked teddy bear as tears mixed with the raindrops on her tiny face. She didn't know where she was. She only knew she was scared, hungry, and alone. Inside that weathered house lived Ethan, a poor single father struggling to raise his young son after losing everything life had once promised him. That stormy night, one simple act of kindness would change both of their lives forever, and neither of them could have imagined the unbelievable truth waiting for sunrise. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share this story with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to Kindness Echoes for more heart-touching stories that restore faith in humanity. Ethan's life had been a constant battle ever since his wife passed away from a sudden illness 3 years earlier. Every sunrise brought another challenge, and every sunset reminded him of another dream left behind. He worked long hours repairing broken furniture in a tiny workshop that barely paid enough to keep food on the table. The roof leaked whenever it rained, the old heater struggled through the winter, and every dollar was carefully stretched before it was spent. Yet despite the hardships, Ethan never allowed bitterness to enter his heart. His greatest treasure wasn't money, but the smile of his 8-year-old son, Noah, whose innocent laughter somehow made even the darkest days feel bearable. That evening, the storm had arrived without warning. Fierce winds shook the windows while rain hammered against the old house like thousands of tiny drums. Ethan had just finished serving a simple dinner of vegetable soup when someone knocked softly on the front door. At first he thought the wind was playing tricks, but the knock came again, weaker this time. Opening the door, Ethan froze. Standing there was a little girl no older than 7, soaked from head to toe. Her expensive dress was covered in mud, her tiny shoes were missing, and her hands shook uncontrollably from the cold. She looked terrified but strangely silent, as though fear had stolen every word she wanted to say. Without hesitation, Ethan wrapped her in his late wife's warm blanket and carried her inside. Noah immediately offered his own dry pajamas while Ethan heated another bowl of soup. The little girl barely spoke. She quietly ate every spoonful as tears rolled down her cheeks. She couldn't remember her home address. She only remembered becoming separated from her family after running away in fear during a crowded charity event when thunder frightened her. Ethan called the local police station, but the storm had caused multiple emergencies, and officers explained they would come as soon as possible. Until then, they asked him to keep the child safe indoors. That night, Ethan prepared the only comfortable bed in the house for the frightened girl while he and Noah slept on the old couch. Before falling asleep, Noah gently placed his favorite stuffed dinosaur beside her teddy bear because he didn't want her to feel lonely. It was a small gesture, but one that made the little girl smile for the first time. Outside, the storm slowly faded, but inside that humble house something much greater had begun. For the first time in months, Ethan felt that helping someone else somehow eased the weight of his own struggles. The next morning, several black luxury SUVs suddenly stopped outside the tiny home. Men in suits quickly stepped out, while police officers followed close behind. Ethan's heart raced, wondering if something terrible had happened. Moments later, a distinguished man rushed toward the house with tears streaming down his face. The moment the little girl saw him, she ran into his arms. The powerful businessman held her tightly, overwhelmed with relief after spending an entire night believing he might never see his daughter again. Only then did Ethan learn the astonishing truth. The frightened child he had sheltered wasn't just any lost little girl. She was Emily, the beloved daughter of billionaire entrepreneur Richard Lawson, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the country. News channels had spent the entire night covering her disappearance, while massive search teams searched forests, neighborhoods, and highways. Richard listened carefully as police explained how Ethan had found Emily and cared for her without expecting anything in return. Looking around the small, worn house, Richard noticed the patched roof, the agging furniture, and the empty cupboards. He realized that this struggling father had shared his last meal with a stranger's child instead of turning her away. Many people with far greater wealth might have ignored the frightened little girl. A man with almost nothing had given her everything he could. Richard tried to reward Ethan with an enormous check, enough money to erase every financial problem he had ever faced. But Ethan politely refused at first. He explained that helping a child in need should never come with a price. Kindness wasn't something to be sold. Those words touched Richard more deeply than any business deal ever had. Instead of insisting, Richard quietly found another way. Within weeks, Ethan's struggling furniture shop received a contract to restore antique pieces for several luxury hotels owned by Richard's company. The work was honest, the pay was fair, and it allowed Ethan to build a successful business through his own effort rather than charity. Richard also established a scholarship fund that guaranteed Noah could attend any school he dreamed of without financial burden. He never presented it as a gift, but as an investment in a kind family's future. As months passed, the two families remained close. Emily often visited Ethan and Noah, never forgetting the rainy night when strangers had treated her like family. Every birthday, every holiday, and every special milestone became another reminder that genuine kindness creates bonds stronger than wealth. Years later, Ethan stood proudly inside his thriving furniture company, employing dozens of workers who had once struggled just as he had. Above the entrance hung a simple wooden plaque, carved by Ethan himself. The greatest fortune is a heart that never turns away someone in need. Employees often asked why those words mattered so much. Ethan would simply smile, remembering one rainy evening when a frightened little girl knocked on his door and changed his life forever. The world often tells us that money changes lives, but this story reminds us that compassion changes destinies. One warm blanket, one shared meal, one safe place for a child. Sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest miracles. If this story touched your heart, please write the word kindness in the comments to show that compassion still exists in this world. Stories like this remind us that even in the darkest storms, one act of love can become the light someone desperately needs. And sometimes, the people we help today become the greatest blessings in our tomorrow. Before you leave, if this story moved you, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Kindness Echoes. Your support helps us continue bringing inspiring stories that remind the world that kindness is never wasted. Because in the end, the richest people are not always those with the most money. They are the ones whose hearts remain open when someone else has nowhere left to turn.